Welcome to the training, How to Fill Out a Chain of Custody Form, brought to you by the State Environmental Laboratory Services Division. This training will describe how to complete a public water supply chain of custody for both compliance and non-compliance samples. Compliance samples are scheduled and logged before the monitoring period begins. Laboratory staff will send you the chain of custody, labels, and containers for each schedule that your system is required to submit samples for if you use the DEQ State Environmental Laboratory. This training presentation will cover how to complete the chain of custody form. Here are a few reasons that we have updated our previous form. To collect new required information, we have also added features to the form and improved the design. The chain of custody is a required form for all samples submitted to the laboratory. It tells us necessary information about your sample so that we can process and analyze properly. In order to accept your samples, we need the information on the form. Where do you get a chain of custody form? If you are a customer of the State Environmental Laboratory for your public water supply compliance samples, you should receive your paperwork and sampling supplies approximately 2 weeks before your monitoring period begins. If you do not receive your paperwork, call the laboratory. We may need to have Water Quality Division update your sampler contact information, but we can also send you the paperwork directly until then. If you need to do some special non-compliance work, you can also use our ad hoc chain of custody for events such as test wells and line tests. You can get a blank ad hoc chain of custody on our website at the link in this slide, from our Sampling Assistance webpage for the laboratory, or pick one up from our sample management area located on the first floor of the DEQ building. Here's an example of a pre-logged compliance sample chain of custody. These are mailed to our public water supply customers with their sampling supplies. Information on the form will already be populated with the information from CIDWIS and Drinking Water Watch for schedules and contacts. These are indicated in red. You will still need to fill out the sampler, the date and time of collection, and other field measurements like free or total chlorine values. These are indicated in green. At the top of the form, over the sample information box, there will be a collect and return by date. This is the target date for returning your compliance samples to the laboratory within your compliance period. Start filling out the form in the sample information box on top of the sample rows. Fill out the collector's name or initials in the sample collection by area. Add a current contact phone number for the collector in case there are any questions about the samples or any missing information on the form. If you have any special collection notes about your samples, please write them in the collection notes area. As you collect your samples, fill in a line for each container that you collect. After you collect your container, fill in the date and time, circle AM or PM. For this example, a chlorine measurement should be provided if the system uses chlorination. Circle free or total chlorine as appropriate. If you do not chlorinate, leave this area blank. A sample ID key is located at the bottom of the form. Any codes used in the sample ID column will be explained here. In this example, RP code is displayed next to the sample ID. At the bottom of the form, the key explains that RP means repeat compliance sample. You will also see codes like RT for routine compliance samples, SP for special non-compliance, or ICE. Samples that have an ICE indicator next to the sample ID need to be stored and transported on ice as there is a receipt temperature requirement. Here are some examples of different schedules you might see. Sample replicate will display in the requested analysis area if multiple containers are collected for a test. Each container gets its own sample ID, but you do not need to record more than one collection date and time for the sample at that location. For organic schedules, you may also see trip blank samples on your chain of custody. These are QC containers provided by the laboratory and should not be opened. They travel with other containers and samples for your sampling event and are returned to the laboratory. They show up on the form to document that they are both provided by the lab with the sampling kit and received with samples. We also see routine compliance sample code on this chain of custody. If you are mailing your samples via U.S. Postal Service or courier, complete the chain of custody portion of your form as you are packing your shipment. Print your name and sign the bottom of the form to relinquish your samples to the laboratory. Add the date and time that you are packaging up your samples. Place the chain of custody into the shipping container, preferably in a Ziploc style bag to keep them from getting wet in case your samples leak in transit. Make sure lids are secure, but not so tight as to break the lid. If your samples are required to be stored or shipped on ice, pack them in a cooler or container and fill it with ice. Pack samples in a way to protect them from breakage. Glass containers should be wrapped in bubble wrap or plastic sleeves. If you have any questions about how to store or ship your samples, please call the laboratory. If you will be delivering your samples to the laboratory, you will complete the chain of custody portion of your form when laboratory staff accepts your samples. Print your name and sign the bottom of the form to relinquish your samples to the laboratory. Add the date and time that you are handing over your samples. Laboratory staff will also sign to receive custody of the samples.